UNITEDWESTRIKE.com radio on the second Saturday of every month for our live international radio marathon. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why.
Yeah, this is Detlev here, Wake News Radio, Wake News TV, producing out of Switzerland in our English-speaking part. And yeah, we are proceeding in our program here, and I have the pleasure to announce Karen Quinn-Tostado. She is the founder of United We Strike and the United We Strike Radio Marathon as well. It's it's a pleasure to have you, Karen. Yeah, why don't you quickly announce yourself and go ahead with whatever you want to talk to us.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Detlev, and I'm really more of the co-founder. It was an idea whose time I had hoped had really come, and it wouldn't be United We Strike if it weren't for you and Alan and Matt and Gary and all the people over the years who have really put a lot of time and energy and heart into this. And I want to thank your listeners and say hello to all my European friends and all of the other people all around the world who are listening, and to encourage you to remember the 15th for collective action, because I no longer think that we're going to be able to survive this unless we take a stand. And we need to take a stand individually and collectively. And the more we can align ourselves at the same time, the better off it will work. And I have been deeply saddened through all these years because we are still not yet standing together with our brothers and sisters. And I had so hoped that when the people in Athens, who just recently had a huge demonstration, and the people in Egypt, and if we had ever really successfully embraced the idea of solidarity with each other, we could have had a global strike. It's still possible to have a global strike where finally we understand so much that we know that the jobs we're doing, if they are not actually working toward enabling our families to have clean air, clean water, healthy food, self-sufficient neighborhoods, and love, we're in the wrong position. And as hard as it is to leave a job, I do understand that. You know, Detlev, all these years, people are afraid to walk away from their jobs because we still are so conditioned to believe ourselves accountable to money, that our value is outside of ourselves. And right now, while we're stuck in this system, we do have to work within it. But people, we do the work. Whether or not you get a paycheck, you still do the work, and they are stealing our money and our children. So before I get into how I'm dealing with the organized criminal syndicate of credit cards, I want to say a few things to back it up. Now, for such a long time, I have wanted an idea whose time had come, an idea that would literally hit people right in their hearts and filter up then to their minds so that they could not ignore that voice within, because things are so very bad and so very wrong. And we are always hearing about the corporations and the too big to fails who are being propped up by the government and by those in uniform. If you are wearing a uniform, you have been lied to. Our children are lied to by recruiters who just get bonuses for big numbers, and they lie our children into war, and then we somehow accept that these lying people who profit off of our children's misery and ultimately many times their death, these children are turned into totally different people as they are stripped through the mind control training of MK Ultra boot camp, trauma-based mind control, until they are no longer individuals, until they no longer can recognize morality. If you cause harm, injury, or loss, you are acting out of morality. You are acting against the people and against the planet. And we need to begin to really recognize this. So month after month, as I kept hearing about all the malfeasance in these huge credit card companies, and I would still continue Excuse me, 1 second here, Detlef. I'm going to have to mute and cough.
Yeah, Karen, you failed to mention that you had a had a flu attack, sort of, because we experienced this. It's not just the Ebola scam; it's also flu, which is taking over here. Most probably sprayed by those interesting planes, which you can usually see in the skies. It's leaving huge trails. Of chemtrails. Yeah, but maybe you can just mention this so people understand.
Well, both my husband and I were hit with what we totally believe is a weaponized version of some kind of a flu or an enterovirus or something, because it was pretty damn miserable, and it took over 2 weeks to finally get better, and I'm still not fully over it. My husband is doing a bit better, but it was pretty miserable because you couldn't eat, you couldn't sleep, and all you did was ache and hurt and have chills, and then it would amp up at night. And the hardest thing is when you cannot sleep. And I've got silver, which helps. I've got oregano oil. You know, I have some other things around here as well, and I've got a tincture with some hemp in it. And it's real difficult to get over this. My sympathies are extreme for the people who suffer the Ebola when they bleed from their orifices and die. And to even be able to speak about these diseases being weaponized, acknowledging that our governments are doing this. Our governments would rather pay for all sorts of hideous and insidious ways to murder us covertly and overtly. This is one of the covert methods, along with Fukushima, that we're not paying attention to. Of course, there's no money for that. There's no money for the ongoing BP Gulf disaster, but there's plenty of money for Wall Street. So the more I listen to this, especially after getting well, it makes me angry. They don't have the right to poison me. They don't have the right to drop what they're dropping from the skies. They don't have the right to genetically alter my food. They don't have the right to lie to me. Even organic chicken, it'll say it's raised organically, but you have no idea whether or not the chicken was vaccinated. So we are truly at a point here where I no longer believe that it's going to be possible to resist until and unless we unite in massive numbers, and we do it individually. And most of us, because we're trained from birth to obey, not to think for ourselves, but just to obey. And we know, we've heard about taxes, which we're supposed to have, that didn't exist before 1913. Just like before the First World War, you didn't need to have a passport. You could just travel the world because you paid for your ticket. What a novelty. You didn't have government looking in every bodily orifice and treating you like a criminal simply because you wanted to enjoy the beauty and the bounty of this planet. This is an abundant planet. An abundant planet. And the reason that most of us are in poverty is because of the purposeful mismanagement of the few in power. The evil, lying, inbred, traitorous eugenicists who they've trained us to call elite. Well, that's what that acronym stands for. Evil, lying, inbred, traitorous eugenicists. And as more and more and more of their malfeasance compounds, we must wake up and we must resist, because poverty only exists because of the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Morgans and the hidden hand behind those people, the queens of the countries out there, England and Sweden, and they are all criminals. So let's listen now to, well, as I got more and more angry, and I would look at this credit card and think, damn, and now I have to use it this month for this, and uh-oh, I need tires here, and that came up, and I have to use it here. And eventually, it just made me sick every month to pay what I knew was a criminal organization. And so to prove my point, I decided I would go online and I would look at these too big to jails. Eric Holder testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee in March of 2013. This is a quote from that trader. I am concerned that the size of some of these institutions becomes so large that it does become difficult for us to prosecute them when we are hit with indications that if you do prosecute, if you do bring a criminal charge, it will have a negative impact on the national economy, perhaps even the world economy. And I think that is a function of the fact that some of these institutions have become too large. Okay, but does that mean he's going to do anything about the institutions? No, they're too large, but you and I are too small. We're just the right size to send in their people in uniforms. And again, if you're wearing a uniform, it's time to think about who you're living your life for, what you're protecting, and what side of history you are going to be on. So a list of settlements reached by the major banks. Here, let's see. There's a national mortgage settlement of approximately $25 billion from February 19, 2012. It was initiated by the Securities and Exchange Commission and 49 states' attorney generals. It's against Ally GMC, Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. And those 5 banks were supposed to provide at least $25 billion in customer relief. At least $17 billion is supposed to be used to reduce the principal to millions of homeowners who are behind their mortgage payments. Another $3 billion should be used to help homeowners refinance if they are underwater. Additionally, $1.5 billion was supposed to be paid to homeowners who lost their homes in foreclosures between January 1st, 2008 and December 31st, 2011. However, the amounts they receive are not expected to be very large. The New York Times reports that 750,000 people who lost their homes to foreclosure from September 2008 to the end of 2011 will receive checks for about $2,000. Now, I could go on with those banks, but I also think that it is important to understand, and I got this from sourcewatch.org. I put links in the chat room at United We Strike. But one of the comments here is that says that while many of the numbers may be shocking, and these are the numbers that these institutions are supposed to pay, it is important to keep in mind that these financial institutions may end up paying much less than the actual settlements amount, because the amounts paid may be counted as tax-deductible business expenses. The financial institutions may be able to receive tax deductions for much, if not all, of the settlement expenditures. All right, let's move down here. Okay, Wells Fargo, New York Attorney General will sue Wells Fargo and B of A for violating terms of settlement. Rust Consulting Firm bounces checks to customers. Wells Fargo has a whole lot of problems here, at least in terms of passing their malfeasance down to us. So actually, we have the problems. The Wells Fargo and Company is a bank holding company. Diversified Financial Services. It has 3 operating segments: community banking, wholesale banking, and wealth, brokerage, and retirement. Provides retail, commercial, and corporate banking services. Provides other financial services. However, here's one of their offenses: selling complex investments without disclosing risks. The settlement amount is $6.5 million. This is from August 14, 2012. That was brought against them by the SEC. In July 12, 2012, same bank, discriminatory lending practices. The settlement amount was $175 million. This was initiated by the Department of Justice. Wachovia Bank, the settlement amount for $627 million, $590 million with the Wachovia defendants, and $37 million in cash settlement with the defendant. From November 14, 2011, it was a class action lawsuit because they were misleading investors about the quality, or actually lack of quality, of mortgage-related assets. Wachovia Bank, again, same crime, $75 million in June of 2012. Okay, let's get to Wachovia again. Fraudulent bid rigging and municipal bond procedures, $148 million with the Justice Department, the Office of Comptroller. Now also know that none of these banks have actually been convicted of these crimes, because, that would be, we can't do that, but we can have them pay all these fines, which is actually an admission of guilt. You're not going to pay a fine unless you are in the wrongdoing. What say you on that, Detlev?
Well, it's incredible. I mean, we've known this for quite some time, that they are basically, enslaving us and making false claims all the time. And basically, it's madness. It's pure madness. If you just understand once how the money system, the fiat system works. I mean,
But would you pay money? Would you pay a fine if you weren't guilty of something and you didn't want it
no.
to go away?
Well, in the meantime, I don't anymore. Before, when you are living in the matrix, if you are still blindfolded, so to say, to the facts, and you haven't really gotten into consciousness yet, you just do what you're being ordered to do. That's like the uniformed, weaponized uniformed so-called police or whoever. They just follow orders. I mean, they're just, they are just bio-robotists, sort of.
Blindly. But corporations are not going to dish out millions of dollars. Of course, again, they get to make up the money and all the rest of it. But they're not going to be dishing out these millions of dollars, which in turn turn into billions of dollars of fines unless they're guilty and they have something to hide. Don't you agree?
Sure. I mean,
So,
that's why.
yeah, Wachovia has a ton of offenses against them. So basically, Wachovia has lots of them down here. Again, like giving misleading advice to investors, charities, and small businesses that purchased auction rate securities. J.P. Morgan Chase settlement amount $269.9 million. The enforcing agency is the SEC. The offense is that J.P. Morgan misstated information about the delinquency status of mortgage loans that provided collateral for an RMBS offering in which it was underwater. J.P. Morgan received fees of more than $2.7 million, and investors sustained losses of at least $37 million on undisclosed delinquent loans. J.P. Morgan is also charged for Bear Stearns' failure to disclose its practice of obtaining and keeping cash settlements for mortgage loan originators on problem loans that Bear Stearns had sold into RMBS trusts. The proceeds from this bulk settlement practice were at least $137.8 million, and J.P. Morgan has agreed to pay $296.9 million to settle the SEC's charge.
But still, Karen, even if they are willing to pay, what they are paying is worth nothing. And
Exactly.
what is the SEC doing with this money? Where does this money, this supposed worth money, going to? Isn't it flowing back to the banks anyways?
Sure, and they're writing it off, as I said earlier. So these are the kinds of things that infuriate me. Now I'm going to jump to another article because I'm hoping, again, to inspire people to think about the action that I'm taking and what you can do if you take your power back and you refuse any longer to be an accomplice. Because I am morally outraged and I am righteously indignant, and it is time for honorable defense. So here is a recent article here about the banks who are too big to pay taxes. There are 10 of these huge corporations, actually, who are in bed with the banks. ExxonMobil made $19 billion profits in 2009. Exxon not only paid no federal income taxes, it actually received $156 million rebate from the IRS, according to the SEC filings. Get that, folks? $156 million back from, again, the totally traitorous IRS. Bank of America is number 2. It received $1.9 billion tax refund from the IRS last year, although it made $4.4 billion in profits, and received a bailout from the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department of nearly $1 trillion. General Electric made $26 billion in profits in the U.S. over the past 5 years, and thanks to clever use of loopholes, paid no taxes. Chevron, wonderful Chevron, still polluting our Gulf, never held accountable for that. We end up paying in every way with our health. People have died because of their malfeasance, but it matters not. Chevron received a $19 million refund from the IRS last year after it made $10 billion in profits in 2009. Boeing received $30 billion contract from the Pentagon to build 179 airborne tankers, got a $124 million refund from the IRS last year. Now let's really also think about this point for a second. the not so United States, the corporation of the United States would rather spend our money on war, on drones that take out 50 innocent people for one accused, only accused, targeted individual who may or may not even be affected when they put these drones out there. They drone weddings. The people in the Middle East are not upset with us because of our freedom. We don't have any freedom. They're upset with us because we're allowing our government to destroy them, their families, and their countries. Every one of the traitorous senators in office, except I guess they voted a few new in, but they voted overwhelmingly, 100%, to send more ammunitions to Netanyahu, who is not a chicken shit. He is a much bigger shit than that. They sent him money for killing women and children in Gaza because half of the population of Gaza were children. Children. On our dime. That's what they would rather pay for. They'd rather use military and SWAT teams to throw people out of their homes into the streets and board up the houses. They'd rather have people on the streets. And now 1/3 of American children are living in poverty. And still this continues. And it's the money that has us. The money system is what we need to break through. Valero Energy, the 25th largest company in America, with $68 billion in sales last year, received a $157 million tax refund check from the IRS, and over the past 3 years received a $134 million tax break from the oil and gas manufacturing tax deduction. Goldman Sachs in 2008 paid only 1.1% of its income taxes, even though it earned a profit of $2.3 billion and received an almost $800 billion from the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury Department. Citigroup made more than $4 billion in profits but paid no federal income taxes. It received $2.5 trillion bailout from the Federal Reserve and U.S. Treasury. ConocoPhillips, fifth largest oil company in the United States, made $16 billion in profits from 2006 through 2009, but received $451 million in tax breaks through the oil and gas manufacturing deductions. And last, Carnival Cruise Lines made more than $11 billion in profits over the past 5 years, but its federal income tax rate during those years was just 1.1%. I want to say, as someone who worked as an entertainer on cruise ships for 5 years, that previously, when my partner had worked on the cruise ships, they would pay you when you were out on the ocean so that you were in international waters and you were not suspect to the IRS fines. But of course, they infiltrated that. And also, to my horror, I found out that on the cruise ships, it's a whole mafia system there. And some of the bravest, most courageous, hardest working people I ever met were the people from so-called third world countries, which I still find highly offensive. This is one world. But these people from Jamaica and from Haiti and from other countries like Sweden and Norway, people who came aboard, but mainly a lot of people from the Caribbean, would leave their families behind for 6 to 8 to 12 to 16 and 18 months at a time in order to work anywhere from 12 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, so they could send home money to their families. And they relied very heavily on the added bonus of tips. And can you imagine that? In our world today, where, again, profit is valued over people, these people left their homes, and back then, without the computers, would watch their families grow up through photographs and phone calls from shore. This is the world that we live in, the continuing dark ages until we resist. And so finally, I had just had it for myself. I kept looking around. I kept trying to see exactly what was going on. I don't know Georgie. I just looked in the Skype chat. Sorry, I've had a lot of information to read. Here's another.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Okay. Here's another article. This is from thedailysheeple.com. When we look at the debt that is accruing, it will take 6.25 billion man-years to pay off federal government liabilities, which is a mathematical impossibility. This is from Max Salvo. And when we hear about these numbers, most of us cannot even figure out what it is. You know, we hear about the government officials and financial pundits. They throw around numbers like billion or trillion. To most Americans, these numbers are indiscernible. They're so incredibly enormous, we can't even imagine what $1 billion looks like, let alone what it takes to generate such capital. And $1 trillion, or better yet, the 17.9 trillion that's our national debt, forget it. There's so much money that we're talking about piles of cash the size of skyscrapers. And the thing is, if we really start to understand this, you know, when we talk about these trillions of dollars being spent on the banks and infused into the shadow investment houses around the globe, what about we don't even know about the shadow government, about the secret space program, about the black budget, or about how many millions of us throughout the years have been compartmentalized into helping the New World Order piece by compartmentalized piece, because we have not been able to break through our conditioning of obedience into looking at the big picture of the horror that we are creating. So if you want to know into perspective, if we talk about 250 trillion, or as Barnhart noted, 6.25 billion man-years, meaning it will take roughly 139 million Americans working non-stop for 45 years just to cover the government's unfunded liabilities at their current levels. What do you think of that, Detlev?
What can I say? I'm speechless. First time. Karen.
Well, so currently there are about 144 million working Americans, with about 100 million not in the labor force for various reasons. Now, they're also lying about those numbers in terms of employment. I heard some pundits say it was something like 5 or 6% unemployment rate, but the numbers are skewed. I heard a very, very good conversation with James Corbett, and I don't remember who was interviewing him, but they asked what the definition of read is. And actually, when you look up the definition of read, it is to guess, because our language has been so co-opted. There are many, many different versions of a definition of a particular word, and most of those words are working against us for the government, like the definition of people and citizen and persons. You know, we get all caught up in these different arguments because we don't even really know what definition they're talking about. And all of a sudden that made so much sense to me. We have, like Freeman Burt tells us to refer to ourselves as a people. We don't want to be a person. I don't want to be a citizen, you know, who belongs to a country. So I choose to be a concerned individual of planet Earth who is extremely concerned as our window of resistance is lowering. And I have another point here that is just absolutely abominable. I cannot even state how horrific this is. This comes from Deagle.com, DEAGEL.com. I also put this link in the chat room. I'll put it in there again. But these are taken from government sites, from United States government sites, which means from the sites of these traitors, these evil, lying, traitorous eugenicists. And they predict here, they've got a lot of statistics up. There is a YouTube. It's also posted on one of the video channels of UNITEDWESTRIKE.com. In the year 2013, the population of the United States was 316 million. Well, the government is telling us that the forecast for 2025 in the United States, the population will be reduced from 316 million last year to 69 million. 69 million. They're killing us. They're planning on killing us. They declared war upon the people many years ago. Detlev, what do you think of those statistics?
Yeah, we've had a show on that in the German-speaking radio shows, which I do, a couple of weeks ago, and we were actually looking at different numbers in whole Western areas. And they're basically reducing all populations all over the place in Western civilized countries. If you look to India, or if you look to China or Iran even, which is one of the enemies of the US, it sounds like, they are basically growing their populations. Yeah. So this is very strange. If you want to fight against another country like Iran, then you would expect a reduction of population. But no, it's the own population which is being reduced. Does this have anything to do with the Georgia Guidestones?
You know, Detlev, I do think that 2014 marker up there that was later taken down definitely was an indicator, even if it was simply because these evil, lying, inbred, traitorous eugenicists were happy about posting the fact that they were finally able to go back in there and wipe out the Palestinians in Gaza. They've been wanting to do that for a very long time. And you look at the amount of people who are being murdered every single day in the name of so-called freedom, in the lies of the United States, which is an imperialist, horrific war machine that is the military arm of the New World Order. These are not accidents. And now they also have proven that Ebola is also capable of being airborne. Now, what are they dropping from the skies? I don't know. But what I do know is they are dropping lithium. They were also caught dropping rabies, the rabies virus and the vaccine from the air. They've been caught with, silver oxide. They also have been caught with barium and strontium. These are also collectively their desiccants. They are pulling the water out of our environment and out of our bodies. They are also dropping these nanoparticles, which could be contributing to all of us having Morgellons. Or also, they're dropping these particles that will enable them to further EMF us. Up here in Washington State now, they are planning on having war games with EMF war games in a beautiful part of the Olympic forest. And can you imagine, Detlev, they're going to put up a huge tower so that they can have frequency wars up there. And again, this is not only for themselves, they are working against the people. We are frequency and energy and water, and as they desiccate us and as they put more poisons on top of us, it is imperative that we understand that we may not have very much longer to be here. And whether or not you want to go down cowering is up to you, but I prefer finally to stand up to these criminals, and that's why I'm dealing with credit cards in the way that I'm dealing with them, and I'm refusing any longer to be an accomplice to their crimes or add my money to the big pile of money that's being used against the people.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm following the messages here also in our chat room. And one of our listeners basically put it in perspective by saying if we only would have a general strike taking place, maybe just for a week or two, yes, then we will have another world. That's what somebody says here. And another one said, well, this is not allowed in the Federal Republic of Germany, which is an occupied country, by the way, by the US corporation. We all know, you're talking about the government, Karen, but in Washington, D.C., but this is not a government, it is a corporation. It is, right, those are chief operating officers or whatever, and this corporation is owned by private banksters.
Right, it is. And so it's, finally, I wanted to list these crimes so that people would really start to get angry, to get as angry as I did. And then you can go online, and it's really easy to go online and to research who owns the credit card that you are paying to. And once you get a list of their crimes, you can take power back into your own hands. We have the moral high ground. So this is what I do. When the phone rings now, I answer politely. However, instead of just admitting that, yes, this is Karen, I say, who is calling? And I get a name. And then I get the ID number of the caller. I then say that this call may or may not be recorded because I have the right to hold individually accountable anyone who calls to harass or intimidate or coerce me into once again becoming an accomplice to fraud. And then I tell them this. You represent an organized criminal syndicate that has been involved in predatory, deceptive, and abusive lending related to mortgages, securities fraud, including creating investment vehicles designed to fail, accounting fraud, brokerage fraud, bribery of government officials, undisclosed conflict of interest in financial analysis and advice, lying to shareholders and investors, robbing consumers with abusive overdraft fees, robbing homeowners by overcharging them by hundreds or thousands of dollars when they were already in bankruptcy and foreclosure, robo-signing of false affidavits and other legal documents, as well as discriminatory lending practices. And that's usually the time that the phone goes dead. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to be accountable, and I am playing with different verbiage. Sometimes that can be coming off in the attack mode. But I want to also start leading these people into acknowledging what they're doing, or at least looking at what they're doing. And we do have the moral high ground. How can I, in good conscience, look at the list of crimes against the people and willingly send my monthly payments in to become part of that fracked up system? And I've had people tell me, oh, well, aren't you afraid of your credit rating? No, I'm not. And I don't think any of us should be. These are criminal organizations, an organized mafia system who look specifically for people who are like you and me. And I want to say also that I can tell these reps very plainly that they can see by my record that I have been a good paying slave for many years, but no longer, because I was not fully aware of the crimes that they have committed. They are not only billions of dollars in debt to the people already, but currently these banks are also trillions of dollars in derivative debt once again. If we did the kind of actions that they did, we would be in jail. There are no too big to fails. If every single solitary time a representative from these organized criminal corporations runs against someone like me who actually points this out, they're not going to want to call. As a matter of fact, I also now get rings to where they don't even talk to me. I've had some people tell me, and I'm documenting this on my blog page. I don't put all of them up, and with being ill and everything, I did turn off the ringer for a while. But I'll tell you, I get a light in my eye, and I feel good in my heart when I pick up that phone, and I can confront someone who may not know, who may be so compartmentalized they don't even have a clue as to the job they're really doing. And when I hang up, they do. And usually they hang up on me, although now I have been called delusional. I had one person, Stephanie, say, yeah, go ahead, put my name up on your website. You're crazy and this stuff. And it doesn't bother me because I know that I'm not. And I also know that as I work more and more with these people, I want to be able to pull them in more and say, yes, you know, once I get your ID number, again, this may or may not be recorded, which is very important because I do have the right to record a conversation. I have notified them, just like they tell me this call may or may not be recorded. One woman said, well, I don't consent to that. And I said, well, I don't consent either. And thus the conversation was over. It feels so empowering, Detlev, to have these people on the run. It feels great. They are intimidated. They don't want to look at their own responsibility. They don't want to believe what they're doing. They don't want to put two and two together. And while I realize it's difficult in these days and times to have to make a living and to have a job, we have to look beyond it. If we want to survive as a people, we already do the work. And the characteristics that we need to embrace are actually easy. Self-ownership. We need to move beyond paper and pieces of metal and anything outside of ourselves giving us value. Self-ownership means I own myself. You own yourself. I recognize that same spirit that gave me life in you. That divine essence runs through us equally. I do not have the right to force you to do anything you don't want to do, no matter how many different uniforms I put on, no matter how many badges or buttons or little pieces of paper with letters on them I hold up to tell you, no, here, this says that I can tell you what to do. It's not right, and it is immoral. Self-ownership, not simply blind obedience to tyranny. Self-ownership. We all own ourselves, and that's all we own. That and the fruits of our labor. We also need voluntary cooperation. The Darwinian theory of survival of the fittest is a lie. We must cooperate with each other. That is the way to get things done for the greater good of all of us. Non-aggression. We are all angry. One way to get your anger out is to do this. What I'm doing, it is empowering. And it's a way to focus your anger, because we don't want to go out and be aggressive against each other. They've pitted us against each other our entire recorded history, which also is full of lies. We have no idea how old we truly are. What we do know is there are 65 million-year-old pyramids found in the Crimea. What does that say for the religions that teach us to die? Right here and right now is where we can create heaven on earth, or allow the hell to continue with our participation. And I say it's time to stop that, because now another attribute that we have so let go is honorable defense. And that is what I feel I'm doing individually when I face these people down, even though it is over the phone. Honorable defense, telling them what their crimes are and refusing to be part of it, refusing to go along with this system that is so dependent upon the money. Imagine the power of millions, billions of us in honorable defense, telling them, no, no, you cannot have my money, you're criminal, and as a matter of fact, you cannot have my labor. I am going to work within my community. I'm going to make sure my family and my neighbors have systems set up where some of us garden, some of us farm, some of us build, some of us sew, and some of us teach our young people the truth as we are learning it, and not the lies of government. No vaccines. Honorable defense for our children. There's another thing that I wanted to say here. Now, some of the states, Oregon being one of them, I don't vote. I'm not going to give them any power at all. I'm not even going to pretend that I believe that they're going to do anything, but supposedly they vote to legalize marijuana, which we have THC receptors all throughout our bodies, and especially in our brain. We are supposed to be using this. Pot was not always illegal. It's illegal because pharmaceutical companies don't want us to benefit. They would rather sell us their toxic drugs. So here's a beautiful, healthy little girl who was confiscated from her parents, who smoked pot in Texas. Her loving parents, they smoked marijuana. She was given away to a foster mother who put her in a coma and killed her. She was 2 years old, and she succumbed to her injuries after being thrown to the ground. CPS. We should not have CPS. You know, when you talk about anyone coming in to take your children away, for the state to think that they own your children, that is, again, another abomination. And when people need to show up locally is when those traitors start to bother good people like the parents of this poor little girl. Every single person in the neighborhood ought to be there. The people who show up from CPS should be kicked out, and they should not have a job. We can take care of people locally. These individuals who are oppressing us are not immune. They have homes. We know where they live. It is time to face the music. We do not need leaders. We do not need politicians. We need each other. We need administrators. We need to set up systems and continue the ones that are serving us, no longer subjected to the malfeasance of those who would stick the boots on our faces and the faces of our children. And if we do want to get out of this, we need to unite. And this is the way, at least, that I am fighting them back. So I would encourage you to think about, what could you do with the money that you spend funding these criminal organizations? Could you buy more food? Could you buy a gun? Could you buy some bullets? Could you buy things to help your family? Could you network with people around you? Could you take your power back from oppressive government and start to claim self-ownership and moral stewardship? I hope so, because it's the only way that I can see we're going to do anything is to resist individually, collectively. Wake up and wake up your families, wake up your children. Look at these criminals and look them right in the eye for who and what they are and their representatives, their minions who are between us and the criminals. It's time for those minions to also go home and take a look in the mirror, and I am hoping that when I finish talking to these people, that some of them do, that it will bother them. It will be that seed that is planted, that pebble that drops into the ripple of their conscious mind when they see the state of the world, when they understand that the real crooks, like Donald Trump, is about ready to go bankrupt for the third time, and yet he's idolized. Turn off your televisions, turn on your mind, and start to turn on to your own life. You do all the work anyway. We do all the work anyway. It is time to unite together and to resist being accomplices any longer to our own demise.
Yeah. Well, to become angry is a way to also become conscious to the fact that we are being lied to all the time. I mean, this is how we can do it, right?
Honorable defense. Yes, there are things to get angry about, and I used to think that, well, maybe we can do this peacefully. We can't. We can't. But what we can do is stand together. And yes, when the people in Athens go on strike or others, how many useless, horrific, meaningless jobs do we have that we hate? If you are working for Halliburton, shame on you. If you are working for Raytheon, shame on you. If you are one of the scientists who for years has been compartmentalized into creating horrific strains of virulent, weaponized disease, what the hell are you thinking? Come on, it is time to step forward and possibly again use that day, use the 15th, do collective action. What would happen if all of a sudden thousands of the people who've been compartmentalized over all of these years decided to step up to the plate one day a month, and they released voluminous information to the people online? How about if you do that? Don't simply be a traitor. Don't promote only your family's wealth at the expense of others. There is enough to go around. This is an abundant planet, but it will not be for much longer unless we address Fukushima, unless we face the fact that the government is able to manipulate the weather and creating derivatives and money from crop failures and from people dying. Why do we live in a world where people are on the street and empty houses go derelict? What kind of justice is that? It is not justice. It is not moral. It is totally out of line. And then we call ourselves civilized. We belong to the state, but we are in the dark ages. And if we are ever to break through to the other side, it takes action. It doesn't just take sitting and waiting to die because you think heaven is somewhere after you die. If you were the landlord of the universe and you had great flocks of people who said their prayers every day, who said their prayers every night, they knelt down and they supported the church, and that's all they did because they knew that when they died they would go to heaven. If I were the landlord, I would look at them and say, well, what did you do on the planet? What did you do to promote where you lived? What did you do to protect where you lived? How could you possibly think you deserve the penthouse now?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you know, we do this over here in the German-speaking area, at least, that we are we have started to ask for official information, for their claims, to prove them, also legally and lawfully, obviously. And if they cannot provide on time because we set the strict date, they receive damage claims from us, which go into the millions.
Good.
Yeah, individually, because they are personally responsible for what they are doing, what they are saying, what they are writing.
These individuals, yes, it's important to do that. Plus, I wanted to say that I've met a lot of a lot of different researchers and people throughout the years. And one researcher who is highly credible in finances, but who prefers to remain nameless, has let me know that actually, if you do not pay a credit card bill, even to the point of $1, these credit card loans are unsecured, folks, unsecured loans. If we refuse to pay for 3 months and they have not received even a penny from us for that 3-month period, they, by law, write off the debt. Just like it magically disappears for these big corporations, after 3 months, they write off the debt. Then they sell this piece of paper, which is no longer a debt because it's been written off. And also remember that when the money is created for our debt, we create it with a signature. The bank gives it to us. However, the bank puts it on the positive side, and they also put it on the negative side, which also cancels it out. So after 3 months, the debt is canceled. Then the piece of paper with the amount that was written off is sold to a collection agency. And here's where I'm sure I'm going to get a lot more people who are really the bully tactics and the rest of it. So these conversations are going to be very interesting as I move into that section, which will be in January. Because from October, November, and December, I got no intention whatsoever of turning over to these criminal corporations any of my hard-earned money. And so after this 3-month period, when they sell this piece of paper, it's actually a worthless piece of paper unless the representatives for this other organized mafia can bully us into agreeing that it's owed and make some kind of payment. And none of it goes to the original credit card company. Now it's all a whole other scam for all these other people who are working against our best interests. So holding them individually accountable is crucial, and I'm going to continue to list names and ID numbers as I get them, and corporations who called. Basically, I've been dealing with Citibank, although I've got Capital One as well. Capital One took over HSBC, which is well known to have been complicit in all sorts of crimes and fraud, financial terrorism against the people. So understand that again, after 3 months of non-payment, then they send in the bullies. Your debt has already been written off. And again, can you imagine, Detlev, what would happen if millions of us all around the world, every time the phone rang and it was one of those 800 numbers, if we fought back in this way? If we refused to cow, if we refused to be an accomplice, and actually if we made them think about what they were doing and who they were representing?
Sure. That's the way to do it. And the other thing is, first of all, those credit card companies or, those bullying corporations are basically belonging to the few, to the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers,
Yes.
and so forth. So it's the same bunch of people who put in, the legal system because they are controlling the courts, they are controlling the prosecution agencies and so forth. Because you may have listened to this, which we discovered here earlier on that Eric Holder has resigned or has announced his resignation recently, and somebody else is going to take over. And this lady who's taking over, she's been working for the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, so she was in the hands of Rothschild, Rockefellers, and Co. So that's the same thing. She will be going to be in the highest prosecution office in the U.S. corporation. So they are controlling everything.
Business as usual, the revolving door.
Right.
They do that, and we allow them to because we give them credit. Also, I heard from an extremely credible source that people who think that their money is safe in the bank because of the insurance, supposedly, that the government is supposed to care for over here in the United States, well, they're only going to cover $1 out of every 14. And if you do have your money in the bank, you might start thinking about it. People are having hard times claiming what they own. These banks now are turning and treating us as unsecured debtors, and so the money doesn't even belong to you when you put it in the bank. So think about all this malfeasance with these banks. Think about what your life is worth. Think about the fact that every day that passes and we live our lives as usual, more of us are taken down individually. And it is truly time to stand together. Now, one thing, too, I don't always only get on the political spectrum. I am involved locally with the farmers market. I'm working with crystals and light and energy. If you want to see some of the things that I do, if you go to wideawakenews.com and the bio page, the host bio page, you can scroll down and see some of the pictures of some of the things I've done. And the crystal on the lower right-hand side is one that was commissioned by Kimberly Gamble for her husband Foster's birthday last year. And I'm proud to say that they're both very happy with it. And I'm also going to be doing some singing, Detlev, with David Tartar. I've got a melody. As soon as I get my voice back a bit more here, we're going to be putting some of my lyrics to music. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be able to do that. So as soon as I get it, you'll have an MP3 and you can check it out there for yourself.
Well, that's wonderful. Now we will be going into a break. Karen, can you join us a little on after the break? Or are you busy? Or
well, actually, Detlev, I still am not really feeling up to snuff. I think that right now I need to kind of sign off for a bit. I can check in with you maybe in an hour or so if you're still around. But I think I need to eat something.
Yeah. Now, yeah. Okay. No, I understand that. No, that's wonderful. We had you in here, and you could tell us your experiences, your stories, which is very important for everybody of us to get to know. And so we will hope to hear from you in the program ahead of us. And usually we are switching then production anyways from Switzerland to the US this time to Matt. He's going to take over in an hour's time. So maybe he will pull you in then later on, maybe in the end of the today's UNITEDWESTRIKE Radio Marathon, where you are meeting everybody else who is still in the game of today's show. Okay, but you talk to Matt about this. Thank you very much, Karen. How is your website or your blog, or how can people reach you?
Well, they can keep up with me on the blog page at UNITEDWESTRIKE.com. And I apologize for the fact that the radio marathon listed down under the chat room is still October. We'll have to work on getting that more up to date, but if you stay tuned, there's a lot more information to come today. And thank you, Detlev, and I appreciate being able to speak with your European listeners. It's amazing to me that they're so fluent in different languages that they actually can hang out with me in English and with you in German. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, and we'll see you definitely. Okay, so everybody, we will go into a break, and we will be listening to Jordan Page, Message of Freedom, and then we are right back after that. So see you then. Bye-bye. Karen, still you can stay on for half a minute, and we talk in the break.
IC Radio Network and UWS strongly promote the use of grassroots patriot music. Please drop us a line and we'll play your music.